The Atheist Experience recently posted a video entitled Levels to Biblical Slavery. First, I wanted to say that the reason that I started this series is because biblical Christianity is not being well represented by the callers on this show, and that's meaning no disrespect for the callers. I know that you all mean well. Having said that, I really want to break down this video and talk about some of the unbiblical misunderstandings that lead to logical fallacies on the part of the atheist experience. But I'm just a guy who makes YouTube videos, so I'm going to bring in some support from men who are greater than myself to help me talk about the topic. Let's take a look at the first clip from the Atheist Experience.
Like me personally, biblical, the dealing with slavery is the dealing with in the view of like divorce. Like, although God did not like it, God allowed Moses to write a decree of divorce in which Jesus called Moses out on it because
this whole explanation is highly inaccurate for several reasons, but you could tell that it was going to be inaccurate by the way that he started the sentence with, "to me personally." We don't have to use our imagination. We have an objective standard to appeal to. In the beginning of this video, both the Atheist Experience and the Christian Caller have presupposed that God condones slavery in the Bible. This is simply highly inaccurate, which we're going to talk more about, but first, let's listen to a little bit more.
Michael, which one is worse, slavery or divorce?
it's slavery. It's slavery.
Cool. Slavery or eating shellfish?
It's slavery.
Slavery or wearing clothing of mixed fabrics?
It's slavery. It's slavery. It's slavery.
Slavery or cutting the sides of your beard and hair?
It's slavery.
It's slavery. So here's a question for you then, Michael. Why did it take until Jesus for him to criticize the divorce thing?
What he's referring to here is in Matthew chapter 19, but it is in no way Jesus criticizing God's decree against divorce. Let's actually hear the text and see what Pastor Jeff Durbin has to say on it.
Some Pharisees approached him to test him. They asked, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife on any grounds?" Some of your translations may say, what? For any cause. "Haven't you read," he replied, "that he who created them in the beginning made them male and female? And he also said, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they're no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." "Why then," they asked him, "did Moses command us to give divorce papers and to send her away?" He told them, "Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because of the hardness of your hearts. But it was not like that from the beginning. I tell you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery."
Now remember that because the Christian Caller said that Jesus called out Moses because of his laws against divorce, the Atheist Experience was then able to latch onto that, also thinking it was true, and his entire argument developed from there just because of that guy's imagination. If the caller had a biblical foundation for what he believes, he would have never said anything like that, because he would have known that of the law and the prophets, Jesus said this.
Matthew 5:17, Jesus says, "Don't think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish them, but to fulfill. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or one stroke of a letter will pass away from the law until all things are accomplished."
Why did God feel the need to make strong rules about all those things? They killed a guy for working on the Sabbath at one point in the Bible, but God couldn't say, oh, by the way, don't own human beings as farming equipment.
There's a difference between the Bible taking men as they come, which is fallen, sinful, and rebellious, and dealing with certain things that they've developed in their culture, like polygamy or slavery, and setting principles in motion that result in those things being phased out. and endorsing. So in the Old Testament, the slavery that is incorporated into the law is a very different kind of slavery than you had in the Greco-Roman world. In the Greco-Roman world, slaves were simply chattel. They had virtually no rights at all. And in Hebrew slavery, if you go through the law of Moses carefully, you will see that slaves had rights, the slaves had legal protections. In many cases, the slavery was simply a glorified form of indentured servitude. It was slavery for a period of time, etc. So he's flying over this at 30,000 feet and not making necessary distinctions.
Actually,
follow-up question. Exactly how stubborn of a person do I have to be for you to say that I should be kept as a slave?
I would say pretty stubborn.
So you're saying that there is a point where you would condone me being a slave?
This was, for many people, the most secure kind of employment they could have ever hoped for, with a good master, with a faithful master, with a loving master. And in the New Testament, fascinating, the New Testament word for slave is doulos, and it's the equivalent to ebed in the Old Testament, but doulos is the word for slave, and it is used dozens of times to refer to a Christian. When we confess Jesus as Lord, we are saying, He is kurios, Lord, I am doulos, His slave. I can't think of a more wonderful relationship that any human being could ever have than to be the slave of one who loved and died for him, who provided everything he or she would ever need, who promises eternal protection, eternal blessing, who raises that slave to become a son, adopts that slave into his family, and makes him a joint heir of everything he possesses in the eternal kingdom.
What a hideous, disgusting thing to say. I'm asking about American slavery right now. Why didn't God stop slavery in America? Why didn't God stop the transatlantic slave trade and say, this is not what I want from you. This is not acceptable. This is not a way to treat human beings. Why didn't God stop that?
God did stop it. God did,
but not in time. If you would just be honest about this, I'd love to have a conversation with you, but you keep jumping around and saying that this and that justifies slavery. And what I'm trying to get across to you is that nothing justifies slavery. There is no justification for slavery, period.
If you say society determines what is right, what is wrong, and that's the basis for ethics, then that means anybody who fought against slavery in the United States of America was immoral, because society had determined it was fine and okay to capture people as slaves and to enslave them and to use them as human property. And that means, watch, this is powerful. If society determines what is moral, then that means any society that has a person within it fighting for transformation within society on any level, the person fighting against that society is the immoral one. Why? Because society has determined what? That we can kill Jews, that we can enslave black people, and anybody who argues with it is the immoral one. Do you see, if you say society determines what is moral, then you are stuck with society changing morality over time, and whatever evil is happening, you cannot war against it because society has determined it. When the unbeliever says, well, I have a basis for ethics. It's what works to keep us alive. We've determined that if you murder others, then we're not going to flourish. We've determined if you steal from others, we're not going to flourish. We've determined if you rape others, we're not going to flourish. What's the hidden assumption there? The borrowed capital from Christianity. Human value and dignity, and that society should flourish. Because we must ask the unbeliever. We must ask them, are we stardust? Why should stardust flourish? And why are you picking this stardust over this stardust? Why are you saying that human beings should be the ones that flourish, who are the random results of evolutionary processes, and not dogs and snails and horses? Why aren't you fighting for them? Why are you fighting for humans? You're acting like humans are in the image of God.
From a long way away, I'll take risks. Swing round that corner, I can't miss.